Hello and welcome to Arab Health Week 2021. I'm Dave Sharp and I'll be your host and moderator for the event. It's day 2. Don't worry, if you missed day 1, well, you missed a brilliant program, but you can watch it again on catch up. Go to the YouTube channel for Future Health and you'll see the whole of the day recorded there. You can skip between all of the presentations, just refer back to the event program. If you've got a particular presenter you'd like to see or a particular presentation, you can do that. So you've not really missed out, but we are into day 2. Of course, we'll be here for the final day tomorrow. My colleague Sandra Garlick will be hosting that day. You're in for a fantastic day today. We've got a brilliant packed program of speakers, but of course this is a brilliant opportunity for you to chat with others, to connect with others, to network with others, because the whole aim of this Future Health series as we go around the world over the coming months is to build a dynamic community of healthcare professionals and get everybody working together so that we can find solutions to the many challenges that the world is facing. It's a chance to innovate, share ideas, share best practice, and to recommend things to others. So I mentioned the chat. We've got a chat box, which you can probably see on screen, so you can use that to chat to each other. You don't have to just keep it work related, of course. You can tell people where you are in the world and what the weather's like, and just to get to know each other. For our presentations, we want you to ask questions, plenty of them. We've got a question slot for each of our presenters and our tech panel, which is coming up later on. All you need to do is type your question in there. We'll have a look at those, and the ones that are the most appropriate and the ones that get voted highest will be asked at the end. And I mentioned there the voting. If there's a sort of a question that you think, yeah, actually, I really want to know the answer to that, you can bump it up the list by voting on that. Now, the conversation doesn't stop today or tomorrow for that matter. We want this conversation to carry on. So we're using a hashtag on social media so that you can find that conversation easily. It's hashtag Arab Health Week. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. If you search for that hashtag or post using the hashtag, then we can connect you there as well. And of course, I mentioned the fact that this is just one of many events that are coming up around the world. We go to Africa next. If you use the hashtag Future Health Series, then you'll connect with those other events as well. So without further ado, let's take a little look at what's coming up this morning. We'll soon be going to Qutaiba Manaseer. He is from AstraZeneca in Africa and the UAE, and he's going to talk about the role of the vaccine as the best hope to end the pandemic. Don't we all want that? Then later on, we'll go to Abdulaziz Al Khalif. He is going to talk about healthcare app development and non-traditional appointments. So that's the cracking sessions we have up this morning. Plenty more coming up later on. So I mentioned there our first presentation, all about the vaccine, hoping that we can end the pandemic. So let's go straight away to Qutaiba Al Manaseer, who's going to talk us through the challenges and the solutions that are coming up through AstraZeneca and other partners.
Thank you very much, Dave. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure being here today. I will be taking you through our journey in AstraZeneca with our partnership with Oxford University and the whole story about the vaccine development and the supply and the rollout of the vaccination programs, including our vaccine. I will start by our commitment for providing broad and equitable access to COVID-19 vaccine AstraZeneca. So far, we have developed supply capacity for billions of doses of the vaccine, and we supplied already around 500 million so far, which helped to save and contributed to save thousands of lives across the globe. We are working with our partners in order to fulfill our commitments to the public health and to fighting this pandemic. Starting with our R&D targeting prevention and treatment. So it's not only the Oxford vaccine or the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine, is it D1222. We have also undergoing currently research for long-acting antibody combination. And also other investigational potential treatments which are targeting the organ damage and how we can help save lives for the patients who are in the end stage of the disease. So like we have different, we are targeting different parts of the life cycle of the virus and the disease itself, and for both the prevention and the treatment. Focusing on the vaccine, our topic for today, I will maybe we just highlight the technology of this vaccine, as you may know, which is based on the existing recombinant simian adenovirus vector, which is non-replicating, and that's why it removes the risk of replicating, especially for the vector virus itself. So that's why we don't have the risk of having flu, for example, because the DNA responsible for the replication has been eliminated. And also it avoids the issues with the pre-existing immunity to the human adenovirus, because we chose, or Oxford University chose the simian adenovirus vector. So this will help also in removing the risk of the pre-existing immunity to the human adenovirus. From the clinical trials, we saw that it induces strong B and T cell response after single vaccination. And from the clinical trials, we saw good efficacy and safety profile. As you can see in the screen, that DNA or the genetic material of the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein has been inserted. So once the virus inside the body, it will infect the cells, and then the spike protein will be produced, which gives the body the ability to recognize this spike protein and then create the immunity. If you look at the path to the development, and if you have a backlog on the like 10 months since last year when the epidemic started, you can see, you will be amazed that we're around 100 days from sequence to humans. You can see in April when the first human trial began in UK. With around 1,000 volunteers. This was around 100 days after the sequence. By the way, this is not the first time that we see such acceleration and the development. In the Ebola, also Oxford University, they were able to have a similar success in developing a vaccine and starting protecting people within a year. So as you can see, the trials started in the UK, later on started also in Brazil and South Africa, and then expanded to the States, and to other parts of the world. And if you remember, last year in December, we had the first authorization for emergency supply in the UK, and which was followed by the WHO approval and other approvals across the world. Of course, EMA in January as well. Collaboration has made this possible, and really I would like to thank all the people who were part of this success story and who worked weekends, worked several hours beyond their working time in order to make this possible, because each one of them, they believe that they will contribute to protecting people's lives and end this pandemic. Talking more about the developing of the vaccine itself, we can see that after putting the process in place, it starts by two almost the definite stages, which is the drug substance, taking around 2 months, and the drug product, which is taking sometimes between 1 month to 2 months. In the drug substance, the stem cells that are producing the vaccine will be infected by the vector virus. Then, as the cells grow and multiply, they will be moved into bioreactors in order to scale up the number of the drug substance that we have in order to produce more quantities of the vaccine. Then we will reach to the purification step, where the vaccine will be isolated or separated from the host cell. After that, in the drug product stage, the fill and finish and the labeling and the packaging, which will be followed by the testing by independent labs, and then the review by the regulators, and then the distribution and delivery. It's important to mention that almost more than 60 tests are performed on our vaccine in order to ensure the quality and safety of the vaccine, and ensure the quality of the product in each and every stage of the process, including the in-process testing and the release testing at the end. The overview of the current development plan and the clinical trials. As we discussed, it started in UK and then expanded to Brazil and South Africa, then to the US, and now we have different clinical trials ongoing in India, Russia, Kenya, and also it will be expanded to Egypt, which is which the objective is to continue study the vaccine and understand the efficacy and safety profile. In addition, also to understand and expand the label for the vaccine in the coming time. From the Oxford-led late stage trials in the UK, Brazil, and South Africa, the first trials that we had the readouts from them, it showed that more than 100% protection versus hospitalization and death, 22 days after the first dose. Also 76% efficacy to prevent the symptomatic diseases, and 82% that can be increased to 82% once we have or when we increase the interval between the two doses up to 12 weeks. This was evident in this slide. If you see on the right side, the more the interval between the two doses, the better the efficacy, which reached more than 82%. And in addition to the clinical trials, we saw also from the real-world evidence that the effectiveness of the vaccine after single dose is consistent with the clinical trial data. 90% prevention of hospitalization in the elderly population. Also 73% effectiveness against the symptomatic disease after 35 days of the first dose for the elderly people more than 70 years, according to the data from the Public Health England. And in the UK also, we saw more than 80% effectiveness in preventing hospitalization in elderly and frail real-world adults more than 80 years. As you can see, maybe in the first stage of the real world evidence, the focus was on the elderly, because in the clinical trials, Oxford chose not to include a lot of elderly people until they are sure about the safety of the vaccine, and that's why the focus was later on this age. The variant, as you know, it's a hot topic now. The vaccine demonstrated 86% reduction of hospitalization versus the UK variant. Similar neutralizing effect was observed for the Brazilian variant. The South African variant is being studied currently, and we will have data in the coming months. And recently we saw in the real world data from the Public Health England also, it showed around 92% effectiveness against hospitalization due to the Delta variant, which is known as the Indian variant. And it also, the good thing, it showed no deaths among those vaccinated. In the same data published by Public Health England, it showed also 86% reduction of the Alpha variant, the UK variant, and no death reported, which is good news for in order to assure the people who get the vaccine that they will be also protected against this variant, which is currently spreading across the world, and it's expected that it will be the dominant one in the coming couple of months. What was our approach to ensure broad and equitable access, which is our pledge from the beginning when we partnered with the Oxford University? First is to secure the funds from the government in order to expand the access, make the vaccine available at no profit, so more people can be vaccinated. In addition to the partnership with the different multilateral organizations in order to ensure fair allocation and distribution, and make it possible to produce around a billion of doses in order to be supplied to the world at the same time, different parts of the world at the same time. Also, supply partners in order to scale up and increase the production and the distribution. We partnered with around 25 partners in 15 countries, and different supply chains are in place in order to supply different parts of the world at the same time. Also, the development and the clinical trials, we expanded the clinical trials in order to accelerate the approval. As we discussed, we got the first approval in December last year, and it was followed by the EMA WHO approval. And we have more than 150 approvals across the world from different regulatory bodies in each and every country where our vaccine is available. What was the action in order to make this take it into reality and reach the supply and make the vaccine available in these countries? First, the first action was to identify the right partners in order to conduct the due diligence and focus on maximizing their capability, and also reduce the cost as much as possible. After identifying these partners, we moved into creating the networks and the supply chains that will be helping us in order to minimize the transportation and the importation difficulties and constraints. And then we established the supply chain by transferring technology. As we discussed, more than 15 supply chains are available, and optimization of the process. And it's not easy because as you saw, it's a biological process. So that's why even after the transfer of technology, our quality and ops team, they kept working with our partners in order to ensure that regardless of the partner who is producing our vaccine, the quality should be according to the pre-specified standards and aligned with our quality and safety standards. The result that we are walking the talk. We have equitable access delivered across the globe. We have more than 500 million doses of our vaccine being supplied to more than 168 countries in different continents. And if we focus on the low middle income countries, we are very proud that AstraZeneca was the first company to partner with COVAX, and we have we reached that more than 90% of the vaccines delivered via COVAX is AstraZeneca vaccine. And as you can see in the slide, it reached to different parts of the world, the most difficult ones, including Africa, even the conflict zones in Yemen, Syria, Somalia. All these countries received our vaccine. So we have our vaccine in more than 127 countries, and majority of these countries are low middle income countries. And this is achieving the balance and the equitable access that we are trying to materialize. Finally, I would like to highlight that whenever you want to have an ideal vaccine, or you want to have the most effective, to know the characteristic of an effective vaccine, of course, the focus will be on the safety, on the efficacy, the immunogenicity, the duration of response, administration, and supply. It's very important to have safe vaccine, efficacious, and not only in the clinical trials, but also in the real world setting, measured by the effectiveness, immunogenicity to give a good immune response, and very important that to have this immune response durable and lasted for a long period of time, which is being studied until now. And also the administration, it's very important to have efficacy and safety, but at the same time it has to be easy administered and also the supply can be done smoothly for these countries, and even for the countries where they have a weak healthcare system. So when you look at the AstraZeneca vaccine, from safety point of view, in the clinical trials, there were no serious adverse events reported in all the clinical trials that was done in the UK, in the US, and Brazil, South Africa. Regarding the safety concerns that happened later on in the real world when the vaccine was rolled out, it's an evidence that the surveillance system was able to detect these extremely rare events. So the average until May this year was among the people who got the vaccine is around 4 out of million, which is an evidence that the surveillance system is able to detect these very extremely rare disease, rare side effects, and which is being studied by different regulatory bodies, and we are cooperating and sharing very transparently all the data with them in order to understand the reason for these rare side effects, and also work with the regulators like EMA, WHO, and the MHRA in order to understand the signs and symptoms of these side effects and the best way to manage them by the healthcare professionals. As you saw also in the news that the EMA, the MHRA, and the WHO stated that the benefits outweigh the risks, and they confirmed that the best way to protect the people we love is to continue protecting them by the vaccine. In the efficacy, as we discussed, not only the efficacy results from the clinical trials, but also the effectiveness data showed, which was like evident for AstraZeneca vaccine, that the effectiveness data sometimes even exceeded or very similar to the results of the clinical trials, which is an evident and reassuring for the scientists and also the people that the vaccine is effective in preventing hospitalization up to 100% in the clinical trials, 92% in the real world setting, and also it's effective against the variants that are circulating currently, like the Delta and previously the Alpha. Immunogenicity, we saw a robust immune response. T-cell response started after almost 2 weeks after the first dose, and the neutralizing antibody activity against the COVID was also shown in the clinical trials. The duration of the response is being studied until now, and assessing if there is a need to a booster dose or not, which we will see once the clinical trials are concluded in the coming months. For the administration, ease of use within the healthcare setting, no reformulation, so it's ready. The healthcare professional just need to start giving it to the patients once available in the clinic, and it is stored in the normal fridge from 2 to 8, which is like the most standard vaccines that they are using for pediatric, for example. Current stability data is around 6 months, which is also give flexibility for the rolling out of the vaccine, especially in as we could discuss in the countries that they don't have well-established healthcare system. The supply, as we discussed, one of the very innovative solutions that was done by AstraZeneca in order to partner with the large-scale manufacturing sites in order to scale up the production, and that's why we saw that more than 500 million of our vaccine have been distributed across the globe. One of our partners, as you know, the SII in India, which is supplying currently India, where we have a very difficult situation there, and we hope that the vaccine will help in minimizing the impact of the epidemic there. Also, we partnered in other partners in Russia and Brazil, in different parts of the world, in order to have parallel supply in different parts of the world at the same time. This was my presentation. I will go back to Dave, and I will be happy to answer any questions from you.
Thank you for that insight. Yeah, we've got lots of questions, as you can probably imagine. This is the world's hottest topic, COVID-19, and a way of preventing it. So, well, first of all, I think, we should say congratulations and thank you, not just to AstraZeneca, but all of the manufacturers of vaccines for the incredible amount of work that you've done in getting the vaccines out there. I mean, you were saying to me just a minute ago that you haven't had a weekend off for the last 9 months. So people are working very hard on this, aren't they?
Yeah, and you can imagine this is like we are in a government affairs team. We are doing these discussions with the government. I would like also to highlight that the efforts by the different governments across the globe, especially the regulatory teams who have been very busy in reviewing data for only for our vaccine, as you mentioned, but for all the vaccines that are available. As you mentioned, our quality team, people who are on the supply chain, they really worked hard in order to make the vaccine available, and maybe the only reward for them that seeing the people being protected and seeing their loved ones being protected by our vaccine.
And of course, the whole point of this presentation is to talk about the vaccine as the best hope for managing or ending the pandemic. Early days, people were talking about herd immunity, some kind of natural human response to be able to control this, but this doesn't appear to be the case. It is definitely pinned on vaccines, or could it be even a combination of the two things?
Definitely, herd immunity is also contributing to protecting people's lives, but it has cost. A lot of people who contracted the disease, they suffered from the symptoms, they suffered from the hospitalization. We lost a lot of people that we love and that are dear to us. So that's why vaccines is the hope, because it will save these people from the disease itself, and it will give them the protection at the lowest suffering or the lowest cost.
We obviously know that there's a lot of people in the world that need to receive the vaccine. That could take a very long time. Why can we not eradicate the disease completely? Why are we talking about possibly having to live with this through our generation? Why can't the vaccines completely take it out?
I think nobody will be safe until we are all safe. And that's why AstraZeneca focus was on the broad and equitable access. If you look on the like low middle income countries, a lot of people, or the vast majority of people, still they are waiting for their vaccine in order to be protected. So that's why it was a great news in Japan summit and the G7 summit, where these countries pledged to provide the vaccine and accelerate donating vaccines to the low and middle income countries, and to COVAX facility, which is the best hope for these countries in order to make the vaccine available for the people in these countries. So that's why it is a shared responsibility for everyone to make the vaccine available, not only in our countries but to other countries, because it is a global epidemic and should be treated in this way.
And those supply chains, you mentioned in your presentation, they're improving all the time, aren't they? This isn't just a case of have we got enough vaccine? This is a case of keeping production going and making sure it's distributed.
Exactly. So as I explained, for our vaccine, it's a biological process. The yield from batch to batch is different. We have more than 60 quality tests performed in order to ensure the quality and safety of our vaccine. Currently, each batch we are improving this and we scaling up the yield and the production and improving the process, which is helping in order to scale up and increase the produced quantity. And the same thing is happening with our partners. That's why the first maybe a couple of months it was the most challenging months, because the demand was huge and we were ramping up the production from these supply chains. But with time, we AZ sites and also our partners are scaling up the production, and hopefully we will reach to our goals by not only this year but also for the next year. And when we, as we discussed, more than around 3 billion doses, our target is to provide globally.
Of course, it's not just about one dose anymore with AstraZeneca. You do then have to have the second dose, which is another logistic challenge. And you mentioned also the potential for having to have a booster, possibly one, maybe an annual booster or every 6 months. So this is going to be an ongoing supply issue, isn't it?
I think the most challenging time was the last maybe 6 months, because limited number of vaccines were available and the production was in the early stage. With the coming time, we will have more data coming from the clinical trials that will tell us more about the need of the booster or not, and we will have more than one vaccine available that will help also to address the disease. As our CEO said, Pascal mentioned many times, that in order to fight this pandemic, we need more than one vaccine, and hopefully that we will have different options in order to protect the people.
Mentioned there the logistics. Here in the UK, where I'm based, I've had both doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, so I'm very grateful for that. We have vaccination centres. They're popping up in all sorts of venues, not traditional clinics. You know, all sorts of. I mean, mine was one was at a hotel, the other was at a golf club, which they'd turned over. So it's important that we get these vaccination centres set up. But in countries where that's not possible, is there any way that we can self-administer the vaccine? Are there any trials to suggest that that would be a safe thing to do?
So I'm not aware of any. Maybe it's being studied in the clinical trials, but as you know, we are limited by our label currently. So our vaccine should be administered by healthcare professional, of course, so that's why we are limited with our label. But of course, in the coming months, a lot of research is happening, and hopefully we will have more flexibility. The good thing about our vaccine that as mentioned, in Africa and in the developing world, it can be stored in normal fridge, and it was easy to be administered by and given by healthcare professionals to their patients. And we, of course, if we can have easier approach, this would be welcomed in these countries.
Obviously, with the growth of global communications, good news is shared broadly, bad news is shared broadly, and there's a lot of misinformation as well, and certainly around vaccines. With the vaccine, are you concerned that some people who won't take it for whatever their own personal reasons is going to actually slow up the chances of us eradicating the pandemic?
Yeah, in the beginning, as you know, especially on the social media, you saw a lot of misinformation, a lot of videos that say things that make some people, especially the elderly, hesitant to take the vaccine. But I believe the more people taking the vaccine, the more evident that people are being protected, less hospitalization, less deaths. I think this will give the confidence to the people, to more people, and we will reach. We saw examples of countries that they vaccinated vast majority of their population, and they almost went back to normal life. I think this will encourage other people, other countries to do the same and to get vaccinated, because again, it is the best hope to avoid the disease and avoid the consequences of the disease as well.
Before we had the vaccines, people talked about finding a way to manage the disease, to possibly cure the disease. And of course, all the talk then was, well, vaccine development normally takes years, not just the vaccine itself, but the clinical trials. And yet here we are, you know, I think it was 9 months in the UK or something like that before the first person received a vaccine. And of course, that made people suspicious. What do you think has speeded up the process and brought that laser focus to not only the development of the vaccine, but getting it out there and into arms?
Yeah, so I think innovation is the answer, and it's not the first time, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. In 2016, when Ebola appeared in Africa, Also, the vaccine was developed in around 10 months, and they started to give it to the people, to protect the people in Africa. And like I think last week we heard the news that Ebola was eradicated, which is great news in Africa. So that's why innovation, I mean that the technology is already there. For example, Oxford already they had the technology of the vector vaccine, which was studied and used before. So that's why after the identification of the sequence of the DNA sequence of the virus, then it was easy to produce the vaccine and start the clinical trials, as I explained, after almost 100 days in the UK. And maybe here we have also to highlight the importance of collaboration. If you remember last year, the identification of the sequence of the DNA was done in China, and then it was shared with scientists across the globe. One of them was also the scientist in Oxford University who developed after that the vaccine. So that's why collaboration between the scientists across the globe, the technology that was already there, and also the acceleration in the clinical trials, all these helped in order to have vaccine that is studied. It's not like they use the vaccine without doing the clinical trials. The clinical trials included a huge number of patients in the UK and Brazil and in South Africa, and also in the US. So the clinical trials that were done, but the acceleration that happened in each and every step, which helped to make the vaccine available in less than a year, which is a great achievement for the biopharmaceutical industry, and also for the humanity at the same time.
Yeah, I'm really pleased that you said that. One of the things I said in my introduction today, and the purpose of these events around the world, the Health Series events, is to bring people together, it's to share ideas and best practice, to collaborate, because obviously you mentioned the pharmaceuticals. There is a great deal of competition, even in the UK. You know, there was this idea that there's a race for the first people to develop the vaccine, but actually for the average person on the street, all they want is the cure. They're not bothered who gets there first. And of course, there's a lot of money associated with pharmaceutical companies as well. Do you think that finance has helped to accelerate the production of the vaccine? I mean, you talked about collaboration and bringing the world's best minds together, but that requires funding, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we saw in the case of AstraZeneca vaccine and other vaccines, there were public funding in order to accelerate the development and the clinical trials. Also, there was collaboration from the pharmaceutical companies in order to provide the vaccine. For example, in the case of AstraZeneca, at no profit during the pandemic, which shows the importance of collaboration, and a lot of meetings with governments, with sometimes even people around me asking me which vaccine is better, and they like start to discuss these competition questions, and our answer is usually that the vaccine that is available is the best vaccine, because regardless of the type of the vaccine, or being protected is the most important objective. So whatever vaccine is available, is this vaccine would be the best one to take.
When the disease first came about, we thought of it as one disease, and then people learned very quickly about variants and how the disease and the virus itself evolves. Just in the news in the last 24 hours, they're now talking about Delta Plus, more transmissible. Does it bind to the lungs more easily? Can it evade the vaccine? This has to be perhaps the biggest fear, maybe among the population, but is it a fear amongst people in your profession that the virus will evade the vaccine? Can it develop in that way?
So I think a lot of research is being happening currently, which will address all these questions. As I explained in the beginning of my presentation, that AstraZeneca, like other companies, is studying different options in the treatment as well as in the prevention. Long-acting antibody is one of them, which is promising currently in the phase 3 of the the development, and hopefully it will like address some of the needs. Other companies are working on different part of the disease, like organ damage also, as we discussed, and the complications that's happening. And they are scientists are also trying to understand the disease itself, because a lot of unanswered questions, why the complications happened and why certain people get exaggerated response versus other people, which has not a unified maybe response or risk factors. So that's why a lot of research is needed in order to answer all these questions, and hopefully we will reach them as soon as possible.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, because certainly the priority is to be vaccinating those most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, those people who are more likely to be hospitalized and possibly die from the disease. But as you mentioned there, there's also some other challenges. I'll give you an example. I contracted COVID-19 in March last year. I only knew this because there were no tests at the time. Through an antibody test that I took some months later, discovered also that my father, who was 91 at the time, also contracted it. We didn't enter hospital, but we were both quite ill. He also had an antibody test. But my 89-year-old mum and my wife, we believe, didn't contract it. And yet we were in close proximity. This was before masks. This was before we were really told to distance. We were in our own homes. That's quite bizarre, isn't it? If we could understand that, then we could target another section of the community and say, we don't know why, but you're also vulnerable and you're not.
Definitely, I can't agree more. And this is what maybe I mentioned, that there are patterns of the disease that we don't understand how it spread from one to another. A lot of theories in the beginning that has been changed later on. So a lot of unanswered questions in this regard. So that's why maybe, as you mentioned, a lot of people are vulnerable, and that's why it's not about maybe knowing that like certain risk factors that for people that they will be having complications or not. The problem that we don't know who will be more exposed to the disease or to the sequences of the disease more than others. We saw elderly getting the disease and with very mild symptoms. At the same time, we lost others who are very close to us. At the same time, we saw young people who are getting the disease, and at the same time with symptoms, and others with severe complications, although they are, for example, athletics. So that's why until now a lot of unanswered questions, but we hope that with time the research and the observations, the studies on the real world setting will provide answers to these questions.
I mean, if it is a disease that we might have to live with in the long term, and we can discover those risk factors. So I took part in a clinical trial, actually, you might be interested to know. So it was a trial in Oxford. I had a full body MRI scan, blood tests, breath tests, and just to see whether there was any longer term damage. I did have some of that long COVID, you know, that fatigue, that horrible cloudiness, which is unexplained, which we may have to live with for a very long time. That's going to put some pressure on the health system. But if we could understand, because I class myself as I've kept myself fit all my life, I'm not overweight, I don't have any underlying health issues, yet I still contracted the disease, I still wasn't hospitalized, but I was still quite ill. You know, is there any research to suggest that it could be to do with, I don't know, my genetics, my blood type? Is it because I'm a man? Do we know any of those answers yet?
I'm not an expert on this one, but from what I read until now is that they didn't identify a certain risk factors for the disease, and that's why it's very important that everyone gets protected by the vaccine. Because for other diseases, we know, for example, in diabetes, smoking, overweight, or lack of physical exercises, these are risk factors. But for this one, we until now the scientists didn't identify certain risk factors, and that's why maybe protection and getting vaccinated is the best hope for for the short term, at least for the coming until we know the answers or identify these risk factors. The best hope is to get vaccinated and eliminate this risk.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is the key message here, isn't it? Is about the vaccines. I mean, I remember when I had coronavirus and I could see that I was improving. My mentality then was, oh, well, at least I've had it. That's good. I've got that out of the way. But that's not actually the case. I still have had my double shot of AstraZeneca on top of the fact that I had the disease last year. And hopefully that will give me super immunity or at least the best level of protection.
Exactly. And maybe one of the points that we need to highlight is that, as you mentioned, the disease itself carries a lot of risks that may be long-term risk. So that's why getting maybe a few side effects, or like some people, they are hesitant that when they get the first dose and they get some fatigue or they feel tired, they are hesitant to take the second dose. But like experiencing this very short term, like 1-2 days tiredness or fatigue is, I think, better than experiencing the disease, which lasts for maybe 4 to 6 weeks with much worse fatigue, and also the risks that carried with the COVID-19. One of the risks is around 25% risk of getting like clotting or severe side effect, severe complications of the disease. So that's why, again, vaccination with all what it carries from like good experience or bad experience is the best way in order to avoid the more dangerous and the more complex complications of the disease itself.
Well, I'm absolutely going to support that view. Having suffered with COVID-19, I said this to my wife, who did have a little bit of a reaction to her second dose, not so much to the first dose, which we found unusual. She had a rash. We'll never really know whether it was definitely to do with the second jab. But nevertheless, as I said to her, I said, I know which I'd rather have. I'd rather have the rash for a week than COVID-19 for several weeks, because I felt absolutely dreadful. I can't explain the feeling that I had. So you're absolutely right that this is the way out of the pandemic, or at least a way to manage it. And let's face it, after 14, 15 months of lockdowns, of fear, of our lives being disrupted, this is the #1 worldwide thing that we all unite on, and this is what we want, isn't it? And you guys are leading the way with the other companies in helping us out of this situation.
Exactly. Also, I would like to take the chance to encourage people to share whatever they experience, for example, adverse events with the regulators in their countries, because this will help also identify and understand how our vaccines, not only AstraZeneca, but all the vaccines, how they react, or how identify possible side effects. Sometimes it helped also in the effectiveness, as we see from the effectiveness data from different parts of the world. The surveillance system in these countries is helping us to understand more the response to the vaccines, and also it contribute to understanding the safety and the efficacy profile of these diseases. So that's why I think the governments, they played and they put a lot of efforts in order to put a very strong surveillance system in order to report these side effects, which will help us also to understand the reaction to the vaccine and make sure that the safety profile is well understood.
That's a very good point. I shall mention that to my wife. I know that when we had our both jabs, actually, we were given a very useful information leaflet, and I think there's a little website address or even a scannable QR code or something in which way we can report those, which all helps with the research and development. We're not being negative. We're just helping with the development of the vaccines. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. You can probably tell my own curiosity got the better of me in asking those questions, and you've answered every single one, and I'm very reassured. They talk about a race between the vaccine and the virus. What's your money on? If you were to say, you know, who's winning, the virus or the vaccine?
The vaccine will win.
Great stuff. That's
hopefully.
Absolutely. We've got to be positive, and I love that upbeat attitude. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and again, I want to express my thanks to you, AstraZeneca, and to all the other people who are carrying out this research and developing the vaccines. Thank goodness you studied hard at school and and got yourselves into that position. That's brilliant stuff. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Dave. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Brilliant stuff. If you want to watch that again on catch up, if there were any elements of the presentation that you missed, you can watch it on the Future Health YouTube channel. You can also catch up with what we spoke about yesterday as well. So do take part in those chats online. Remember, on this amazing platform that has been built for the Future Health series, you can connect with each other, you can exchange contact details, you can chat. I've already mentioned it's a brilliant place to network. You can learn from each other. You can see these brilliant, insightful presentations as well. We've got it all here for you. So do stay in touch. Remember to use the hashtag as well, which is Arab Health Week. Which is on all of our social media channels. If you want to make a point or raise a question, if there's something you've missed, we've got plenty more coming up, but we'll take a little break now. We'll be back in around about half an hour with our next presentation. See you then.